How's it going, everybody? I'm done with the housing and the bracket. Now let's finish up the wiring on the fog light and tie it into the accessory plug on the Softail. My name is Ron, and here on this channel I tackle projects of all sizes related to the bikes I ride, and I give you information about the different products that I try. And this is video 2 in a 2-part series about the old school retro fog light that I added to my Softail Street Bob FXBB. In the first video, which I'll link to here, I covered the modifications to the light housing itself, and I covered the fabrication of the bracket. And in today's video, I'm going to cover the final wiring inside the light housing itself, tying into the toggle switch, and also the wiring needed to tie it into the accessory plug on the Softail Street Bob. As I mentioned in the first video, when I started this project out, I knew I wanted a fog light of some sort, and I really wanted an incandescent bulb. And after considering different options, I decided to stick with a single light on the left-hand side of the bike, and part of that reasoning was so that it would offset that 𝗧𝗛𝗡 monster sucker intake that sticks off of the right side of the bike. So with the fog light on the left side, just visually it sort of balances things out. And the bracket that I fabricated in the first video spaces that light out far enough so that the light projects onto the road without being blocked by the fork. So let me recap where we're at in the project so far. In the first video, as I mentioned, I finished the modifications to the housing, and that consisted of determining which toggle switch would fit inside the housing, making sure I had good clearance, determining the location for the toggle switch, and drilling that out and mounting it into the housing. The first video also covered the bracket itself, and my failed first attempt at making the bracket, and then the second attempt, which seems to be working fine so far, and that's what I've gone with to get this installed and finished up. In today's video, I'm going to tackle the remainder of the wiring for the light itself and the toggle switch, and how I tied that into the 6-pin Deutsch connector behind the left-hand side cover. In case you didn't see the first video, I wanted to wire this into the accessory plug for a few different reasons. The first of which is I really didn't want to wire anything directly to the battery. I did not want to cut any of the existing wires on the bike, and I also wanted to tie it into a circuit that was switched so that when I turned the ignition on, that circuit was live, and when I turned the ignition off, that circuit was dead. I wanted that extra bit of insurance to know that the light could not drain the battery when the ignition was off. That way, if I turned the bike off and stepped away, the light couldn't be left on to drain the battery, nor could it be turned on inadvertently. So when the ignition is off, there's no way that circuit can pull anything from the battery. Depending on which bike you have, you might have a couple of different plugs available to tie into for a fog light or other accessories. You may have just a 2-wire plug, or you may have the same 6-wire plug that I have, which is technically like a CAN bus plug, but it works just fine for accessories as well. One nice thing about the accessory circuit is that it supports up to 15 amps of total current draw. And in my case, the fog light's only pulling like maybe 3 amps, something like that. And I know there's no chance of overloading that circuit whatsoever, so I was not hesitant to tie into that accessory plug. So if you're going to tie into that accessory plug or any of the accessory plugs on your bike, make sure you know what kind of current draw you have, and if you're above the limit that the accessory circuit can handle, just wiring a relay into that, and then you can do whatever you need to do to get the right amount of power. In one of my previous videos, I showed you how to unpin and repin the 𝗖𝗢𝗡 connectors on the Harley-Davidson. I'll link to that video here. But today we're talking about the Deutsch type connector that's used on the Harley-Davidson. So here's a diagram of the pinout for that 6-pin Deutsch connector. This is for the 2019 Softail Street Bob. Be sure to check your manual for whatever differences you may have on your bike, but again, this is for the 2019 Street Bob. We've got a couple of CAN bus pins that I'm not interested in right now. There's a couple of pins that aren't used, but we do have pins 2 and 5, which in this case give us the ground and 12-volt switch power, and that's what I've tied into to provide power for the fog light. So the first step in this process was to find that accessory plug behind the left-hand side cover. So pop the cover off, dug around in there, located the plug, pulled the rubber plug out of the end, and then I wanted to check to make sure that it was indeed switched power, so I put the voltmeter on it, gave it a quick test, confirmed that that was switched, and then it was on to the soldering portion of the project. I decided to go with sort of a do-it-yourself plug. It came with both halves of the plug and all the different pins needed to wire it out. In the video description, I will have a link to the exact Deutsch pin connector kit that I used. You've got lots of options. I'll put several other links in the description as well. Check them out, see which one works best for you, and give it a shot. And as I mentioned, check your diagram to make sure you know what the pinout is for your motorcycle. Knowing that I had the pinout confirmed, I could go ahead with the soldering portion of this project. And of course, you could crimp all these connectors, but I'm a big fan of soldering, so I made sure everything was soldered. But again, in my case, I was only concerned about pins 2 and 5, so I went ahead and soldered those 2 pins on. and then put all the pieces together necessary to assemble the plug, snap it together, make sure everything fit together like it should, and then test fitted it on the bike. One thing I will point out though, I had to make a minor modification to the little retainer cap that snaps into that plug. For whatever reason, that was a little bit tight on the Harley-Davidson connector when I inserted it into that. So I had to pull it apart, file down the edges a little bit, make sure it would go in and come unplugged without pulling the plug apart. Once I made that little modification, everything was fine. Once I had the pin side of things finished up, I did a quick measurement to make sure that I had the length of the wires right. Went ahead and cut those to length. Once I finished up the 6-pin connector, I slid heat shrink onto those wires and shrunk it down nice and tight just to give it a little extra protection. And then it was on to finishing up the wiring in the light housing itself. Now the light did come with a few wires of its own. I did reuse those wires and I just cut off a few of the connectors and replaced those with the ones I wanted to use. Tied everything into the toggle switch. And then gave it a quick check to make sure it was working as expected. And then it was on to the installation. And if you saw that first video, you know that I test fitted that bracket to make sure everything fit as expected and make sure that it spaced everything out the right way. It did just fine, so I went ahead and painted that up. And then when it came to install that bracket on the motor mount, I pulled out that bolt, checked the length, got a bolt that was a little bit longer so that it would account for the thickness of the bracket and the lock washers I was using, and then reinstalled that and torqued it down to specs. I then could just install the light onto the end of that bracket, do the final wire routing, tie everything down with zip ties, plug it into the accessory plug, and then give it one final test to make sure everything worked as expected. Now I've got a fog light. So it's taken me a little while to actually put this video together. I finished this fog light up many months ago and I've been riding with it for quite a while now, and it's done really, really well so far. So I'm very pleased with it. It's got high and low beam settings. The toggle switch is working great. I absolutely love it. It's one of the main things I wanted. It's so satisfying to click that toggle switch whenever I want to turn the light on or off or change it from low beam to high beam. And I absolutely love the incandescent bulb. So basically, it's accomplished everything I wanted and I've been really happy with it. You heard me mention in the first video, there's one thing that I wish was a little bit better, and that's the fact that even with that motor mount bolt torqued to specs, over time, because of gravity and bumps and things like that, that fog light bracket will drop down ever so slightly, maybe 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch, something like that. John O'Keefe came up with the idea of drilling out the fog light bracket and drilling into the motor mount bracket and maybe putting a pin into that. I like that idea, but I think I may modify that slightly, drill out the fog light bracket, tap the motor mount bracket, and then put like a socket head cap screw or something like that into it. That way I can thread it in, Loctite it, and know it won't come out, and it's easy enough to pull it out if I need to remove that bracket. So shout out to John O'Keefe for the original idea. I appreciate that input. I'll give it a shot and see what works. If it turns out that that won't work, I'll come up with another idea. And if you have any ideas on how I might prevent that bracket from dropping down, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear that. If you have any other thoughts about this project, or you're thinking about a fog light project of your own, let me know what you're thinking about. I'd love to hear that as well. I really appreciate the comments and the interaction from everybody. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure the rest of the community benefits from that as well. So maybe that will give you some inspiration for a fog light project on your bike, or if you've already been thinking about a project, maybe this will help you think about some of the solutions that you could use for that project. I hope you found this video beneficial or useful, and if you did, please hit that thumbs up button and share it with your friends. That really helps the channel out. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hitting that notification bell, and enabling all notifications. That way you'll be alerted for all the future videos that I post. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the ride. I'll see you next time.